Hello, everyone. We've got another great episode for you. Thank you for joining us on Here Together, a interview series all about how digital events may be separated by physical space, but we're still here together digitally. Thank you for tuning into these, and I think you're really going to get some great value out of today's presenter or our guest, who is a workshop facilitator. He is a coach. He is a teaching artist. He is an improvisationist. I'm going to get that word right one day. And he's just done some really great things over the probably the past decade or more. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Gary Ware.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Joe, for having me on. I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, I'd like to kick it off with just briefly, how does improv um, work with what you're currently doing? I think it's breakthrough play is what your current effort is called. Is that correct?
Yes. And I'd like to explain it with a quick story. So think of it like this. Improvisation is the art of being on a stage without a script, and you get a single suggestion, and your job is to create something engaging, entertaining on the fly. And not only do you do it sort of gracefully, but there are other people involved. And the skills of learning that can help you in any area of your life. I personally got started with improvisation as a way to be a better public speaker. And when I took that first class, I was like a lot of people. I was so nervous. Oh, I don't think I could be funny. What if I look silly? What if I look stupid? However, once I stepped foot on that stage with those 15 other people and we started playing those games, I was completely present. I didn't think about my to-do list. I didn't think about anything else, and I felt comfortable. And I started learning these amazing techniques that allows improvisers to do all of that magic on stage. And then it's like, how you do anything is how you do everything. I couldn't turn it off the moment I left the stage. So I immediately was thinking, man, there are so many people that need to know this, and it can help and enhance their life in so many ways. And that was the start of the journey.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah. So when you're doing workshop facilitation, for instance, in a digital environment, do you think that comes into play there?
Yes, it especially comes into play in a digital environment. So with improvisation, like I said, we have these principles, these guiding frameworks that allow us to essentially be ourselves. And one of those is it's all about there are no mistakes, only gifts. Most people, they have a challenge with failure and making mistakes. In a digital, environment, there's so many things that are outside of your control that could go wrong. And if you are worried about making a mistake, if you're so focused on just getting it right, when those things do go wrong, because they will, you get thrown off and you get so just out. It sort of interrupts your pattern. It's a
Yeah.
big pattern interrupt, and you can't function. Improvisation has helped me to realize, oh, you know what, that quote unquote mistake is a gift, and it's helped me to sort of bounce back, get my composure, and move forward. So that's just one that I just want to throw out there, that I feel like it's something that all people who are running digital events need to hear, need to realize that, hey, you know what? Failure is an event. It's not a person. Just because you made one mistake, just because some glitch happened, is not a reflect on you. And if you have sort of confidence, you can bounce back with grace, and people are going to forgive you. People know that we're not perfect.
So true. So true. Yeah, I think it's almost in line with what they say in programming, right? It's not a bug, it's a feature. Um,
Exactly.
uh, y- you know, when you're doing workshop facilitation and keynote speaking, what are kind of the subjects that you normally delve into?
Yes, using my experience with applied improvisation, so that is, using improv skills in other contexts, and what I call purposeful play. I like to cover. I call them essential skills. Some people may call it soft skills.
Okay.
These are the skills that will amplify your ability to be persuasive, to be yourself, and that is creativity, confidence, communication, collaboration. Those are the big things that in my talks and workshops, I feel like if you can master those skills, you can do anything.
Yeah, yeah, and so we've discussed play, and you're talking about collaboration and adults. I think that's it's a very interesting thing. Uh, Gosh, 5 6 years ago, I actually gave a presentation for a group on collisions in play for adults, and the whole idea was that adults need a sandbox. We no longer are comfortable playing in and amongst ourselves, and so I think that's been really challenging in this digital environment that people, particularly people who were thrust into it and who didn't already have the best video camera, audio, whatever. They're trying to learn all of these things while they're trying to continue to communicate, hopefully in their minds, in the environment that they were used to, the old normal. Um, are there things that you're seeing that would be useful for a digital event organizer or a planner to consider to help those audiences kind of feel safe and create that sandbox for them to play in?
I'm so glad you asked because I love the concept of a sandbox because it's so true. As adults, we feel like we have to be perfect at all times. But if you think about, if we could just sort of roll back the clock and think about when we were younger and when we were playing, whatever it is that you were doing, whether it was a video game, sports, board game, solo play, you were completely captivated in the moment,
Yeah.
and you made mistakes, but it's okay. There was uncertainty, and you welcomed it. But in the real world, as adults, those are the things we fear. We fear uncertainty. We fear making mistakes. If you can, if you can bring that play like sort of wonder and spirit to everything that you do, you create that sense of belonging. You create that warm environment where people welcome the unexpected. And so that's the first thing is bringing that spirit of play into everything that you do, because it will allow you to go with the flow. So that's like from an event organizer mindset. Now, from the participants, you made a good point about like creating that sandbox. We were used to doing everything in person, and now we're thrust into doing like hybrid or digital only events. And you can't just do it exactly how you did it before. You have to reimagine it. And more importantly, because people are, they're jumping on, they're probably Zoom fatigued, they're tired of staring at a screen for so many hours. As an organizer, what can you do to create intimacy? And what I mean by that is, how can you create that connection? And I feel very strongly that it is possible to do it in a digital environment. We spend so much time creating all this content that's going to be valuable. However, if if people are so concerned about like what's going on in the background and all this other stuff, they're not going to be focused on your content. So imagine if you can just take a moment and connect with your audience. And it can be as simple as engaging with them in the chat, seeing where they're coming from, asking them a simple question so that you can get to know them, and repeating that back so that they feel heard and seen. That is going to create what I call the dose, DOSE, which stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, the neurochemicals that make us focus, creative, feel like we belong, and trust.
Yeah.
When you create those neurochemicals, people are going to feel like they're in that sandbox. They're going to be willing to play with you.
Interesting. So, building on that, it's interesting. We did a quick tip a few weeks ago on asking everyone where they're from and maybe mapping it out depending on what service you're using in the chat. What do you see as the biggest challenge for those people who are continuing digital events to actually to build that, in particular the trust? I mean, I think all of those are kind of important, but trust is the one that gets you to community, in my opinion.
Their biggest challenge, what I feel like we're getting in our own way. We are trying, I like to say, we're seeing the world as a proving ground. And when you see the world as a proving ground, you're trying to be perfect. You're trying to put up this face that, you know what, I got everything under control. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm this expert. And that is a barrier to intimacy. That's a barrier to connection. And by doing that, you forget what it's like to be human, and you forget that, hey, we're all just human. And so that is, I feel like, the biggest thing that people forget. You're trying so hard to put on this event, and you want people to like you. You want people to enjoy this, and then you forget the little things that matter. And you're absolutely right. I remember, when this pandemic started. And so I went from, doing everything in person to slamming on the brakes, figuring out this digital space. And I remember my very first digital experience. And it's interesting. So thinking where I am now and where I was then is night and day. However, I was scared. I was nervous. I'm like, are they going to like this? And you know, I didn't have the equipment that I had now. I just had a concept, and I had some willing participants. But I remembered, just my improv training about, connection. And I just took a moment. And one thing that I did, so improv has taught me to experiment. Everything's an experiment. And when you think of things as an experiment, then if it doesn't go right, you're like, oh, well, we just tested it and we'll adjust.
Yeah.
But I used this program called Mentimeter. And Mentimeter has the ability to do a word cloud. And again, this was April of 2020. So, anxieties are high. People are uncertain of what's going on. And I just asked a simple question. I said, you know, how have you been feeling? You get 3 words. And it created this beautiful word cloud. And one of the interesting things you talk about, sort of community. Community is when people start to realize that we're more alike than separate.
Yep.
And the word that was the biggest, as in, everyone, more people use that word, was anxious. And in that moment, my sort of need to sort of prove, to them that I was good enough, and that I was worthy to be there. So it all melted away. And then I realized in this moment, people just wanted to come together as community. And so I, just I adjusted a few things on the fly, but I wanted to give them what they needed. They at that moment needed community. They needed to connect. And it wasn't perfect. I made lots of mistakes. But when you make that connection with people, they're going to forgive you, because it's more about the experience than me getting all my words right, or me having the most beautiful setup, or the best looking slides. It's just all about, I believe it's the Maya Angelou quote, at the end of the day, people are going to forget what you said, but they won't forget how you made them feel.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. So do you think you do? I know all great keynote speakers adjust to audience reactions, interactions, whatever the case may be. We all know that's more difficult, particularly in scenarios for digital where you can actually see the audience and get those 70% that are nonverbal cues. Um, but of the cues that you have, whether it's through a chat box or Q&A or whatever the function may be, likes, emojis, if you're lucky, do you think that digital requires more flexibility in that skill set, or is it the same?
More, because you're absolutely right. Communication is not what you said, is how what you said was received. So you can set up the what you think is going to be the best keynote that is going to meet the objectives that you stated. And when you're in person, yeah, you can look around the audience, and if they're giving you that blank stare, you can realize, all right, you know what, something's not clear, and you can adjust, maybe re-clarify something. Or if it looks like, maybe they're getting a little bit bored in that, maybe you pop in a joke, or you do something, what I call a little spark, just to sort of amp up the energy. In a digital environment, it is so challenging, and people that are moving to this space need to realize that you should probably cut down your content way more than you think, and implement more interactive elements so that you can get that feedback. Maybe it's as simple as, after you make a point, invite people in the chat. Tell me what you think about that. Or, if you have the ability to have like the different reactions, give me a thumbs up if this is making sense. And be vulnerable and open if things are not making sense, to adjust. But you have to be intentional about that, because you're absolutely right. When someone is behind a screen and you can't see them, and if you're losing them because you're too complicated, or maybe it's a little bit boring, or whatever the case might be, they're going to pop open a tab and they're going to do something, and now they're barely even paying attention. So you have to, and this is something that I advise all people in a digital space, as a way to get their undivided attention.
Do you know?
How can you? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask. You're saying this, and it's making me think. Do you think that digital, perhaps, keynotes and other presentations are going to evolve more into kind of a pick your own experience, or choose your own journey, or whatever those things are that they do online? Do you think maybe that's the direction that some of these things are going to head? Like the crowd will help you decide where you need to move?
The intelligent presenters, speakers, content creators are going to go that route. People want a personalized experience, but what this requires is even more preparation.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So it may, when I mean more preparation, it's preparation so that you can be more flexible. I'm not saying memorize more scripts. I'm just saying have things in the back burner. Understand your content so well that you're right. As you are taking a pulse on your audience, if you find that you thought they were going to be at one level and they're not, how can you, boom, say, hey, you know what? I got that. I got you. Here is something else. They will love you for that.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, yeah. So, do you think that's going to be a trend that you see continuing? Do you think you'll continue? I know on your event horizon, you have a few more virtual events still, virtual workshops. Do you
Yeah,
see that as something that's going to persist once restrictions are lifted?
I do. And so in improv, we talk about, we do this activity that's really great with reframes. It's called Unfortunately, Fortunately. So it was unfortunate that we had a global pandemic that essentially shut the world down and forced everything online. But the fortunate thing, it did allow access to communities and to individuals that you wouldn't have never been able to connect with. For example, in a few weeks, I am doing an event for children in Nigeria. It's for a nonprofit. We're going to be doing some improv games and whatnot. They couldn't have afforded to fly me out,
Yeah.
but because of this digital space and how we have evolved over the last year, we're going to be able to connect and have an amazing experience virtually. I wouldn't have been able to ever have done that and provided that impact. So this, like, I love the innovation. The fortunate thing, over the last year, so much innovation has come out. The digital experience has leveled up tremendously. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens between full virtual events to hybrid events. Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Awesome, awesome. So, um, if the audience were going to, my audience, were going to ask you, what is one thing that they might need to ask you that I haven't asked you already?
One thing that is not asked much, that should, that you should be thinking about, is how can I practice getting better with uncertainty? Because again, it's going to happen. And I like to say, this is where play comes in. Because when you were playing, the cool thing is that, believe it or not, your brain is very malleable. And when you're in play, it's like a simulation. So that's how you can get better. So I advise people, what can you do in that sandbox to allow you to experiment? Because I get my like sort of the things, my guiding points from my world of improvisation, and it's not about doing reps by yourself in front of a mirror. It's all about getting in front of an audience. And if you are, getting in this digital space, I know that you're nervous. I know that you don't want to make mistakes. But my advice to you is, how can you make more mistakes in front of a forgiving audience in a digital environment, so that you can get used to anything that can happen, so that when the stakes are high, you're able to move with grace. So again, let's get the reps in. And I know that is challenging for people to hear, but it's necessary.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that plays in really well with. Uh, there's some people that believe that we're going to go to 365 days of events per year, right? Versus these one and done kind of big annual events. So there'll be more interaction and more experience. Perhaps those smaller interactions along the way provide some of those opportunities that you're talking about. Um,
Agreed.
yeah. I mean, do you think there are better times or worse times to do some of those experiments?
Um, Better times or worse times? I guess every time is the best time. And even when it, actually, to be honest, I feel like the best time is when you don't want to do it, because it's going to, one, prove to you that you are more resilient than you give yourself credit for. And that any time is, there's always a time that you can make a connection. This is the thing with adults. Like, we like to be perfect, and so we want to wait to that perfect time to do that event. Um, and I read this amazing book, Creativity Inc., and it's was written by Ed Catmull from Pixar, and it's the Pixar story. But he talks about the Pixar process, and whether you are a fan of Pixar and Disney or not, we can all agree that Pixar makes amazing movies. And they've created hit after hit. And one of the things that they discuss in Creativity Inc., that is why they create hit after hit, is that they don't wait to release something. They have what is called the brain trust. And as they are working on something, they're putting it out there. They're getting real-time reactions from people, and they're making adjustments. You're working on that keynote, you're working on that digital presentation, you're doing the reps in your mirror. Your mirror is not going to give you feedback.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is to put it out there. If you look at stand-up comedians, so how I get better, I like to look at entertainers, and I like to look at their methods, and I like to see how they train, how they perform. Stand-up comedians, they stand-up comedians is one of the, like, that terrifies even me. Being up there by yourself, with material that you worked on, and you see if an audience responds to it, and they get up there knowing that it's probably going to bomb, but they get that feedback.
Yeah.
They're very meticulous in that, and then they go and they rework it. So what can you do with your material, even if it's not ready yet? Maybe you take a section of it and you do a quick LinkedIn, Facebook Live just to talk about that section. Maybe you go on a podcast like this and practice talking, talking about it, because you have someone that you could sort of get feedback from. That's going to help you improve your craft.
Yeah. So, thinking about that, for a digital event planner, um, are there any tips you might have for how they might assess someone's ability to be flexible in this format?
One thing, so that's a really good question, and so one thing that is a pet peeve of mine, and this was a big pet peeve in the real world, but it's even more in the digital space. And I feel for digital planners, because again, you're putting together this amazing program, and you're expecting your speakers to adhere to schedules and guidelines. And when people sort of go over that, that just ticks me off. Like, you have a 25-minute slot. You said you're going to deliver on a 25-minute slot. And then you go 35 minutes. That, 10 minutes can, just derail everything,
Yeah.
and it can provide a subpar experience. So one thing that I would advise these planners to do is, as people are submitting, since we have been in the digital space, check out their material, see what they have, what they have delivered, and, get, get a commitment that they're going to adhere to the timeline. And again, because it is digital, maybe even do a run through with them, because that is the thing that can, in my opinion, really derail an event. And people think, well, it's great content. Well, guess what? You're not thinking about the audience. You're not thinking about the overall experience. You're not thinking about the person who, especially if it's something where it's sort of on demand, quasi on demand, but it's still like a time limit. People are still in this one, and then the next one's queued up and ready to go, and then by the time they jump into that, it's already 5 minutes in or something like that. That's not a good experience.
Yeah.
Or now people are staying online even longer, and then you didn't give them a chance to just run to the bathroom really quick. So again, you're not thinking about the audience when you are over delivering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. So, if you're uncertain, run through it with them, and maybe check some of their
Yes.
prior material. Yeah, I think
Yes.
those are great points. And do you think that it's better to check from digital events versus everyone has a reel that they had from when they were on stage before everything went sideways. Do you think that's a good judge of how they're going to be in digital or not?
No. Check their digital uh, sort of content, because that is another thing that really ticks me off, is when people assume, oh, well, this is how it was on stage, this is going to translate perfectly to digital. No, it doesn't. Not at all. And that is a disservice to, the audience, to just assume that, oh, my keynote presentation that I did in front of 300 people is going to kill in a digital environment. No, it may be a snooze fest.
Yeah.
And yes, we need to see how people act in the digital space, because there are so many other things that come into play, in my opinion, and I know you probably agree, is when you're in a digital space, it's more than just the talk. It's everything. Like, all right, what's your, and we talk about this in improv, what's your stage picture like? What are the other things that you're doing? How can you sort of navigate this space and feel comfortable and deliver great content? So yes, you need to check out what people are doing in the digital space. And I know that not everyone has the top of the line equipment. I'm not saying that they have to have this. I'm just saying that they need to respect this environment and reinvent their talk, because not everyone wants to hear someone just blab on for 30, 45 minutes. You need to be able to change modalities so that you can keep people engaged.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And breaking state so that they get back with it, or
Right.
whatever the case may be. So, is there anything that I've missed?
Yeah, one thing, this is a big thing. Again, as I've been talking, you realize that I come from an entertainment background, and that's important because imagine if you could be the insert your favorite entertainer here of your industry. That's going to get people from coming back. Right? That's going to keep people coming back. Forgive me. That's going to keep people coming back and coming back, coming back. You're, and our mutual friend Stephanie Liu talks about this all the time. Uh, Data tells, but story sells.
Yes.
So, how can you be an entertainer? That is the thought. How can you be an entertainer? And that doesn't mean that you need to be cracking jokes. However, levity and humor goes a long way. What are you going to do that is going to delight and wow that audience, that is going to pique their curiosity, get them in that childlike state so that they are fixated on what you have to do. And that is, again, this is where we get to be creative. This is where we get to be in the sandbox. And maybe it is because we're in a digital environment that we can add some cool effects that we couldn't have done in person.
So true.
Maybe it's all about, you need to get out your stories, and what are the different stories that you have that are going to, again, elicit those feelings that people need. We're in a digital environment, and like we said earlier, we have less cues, but these tools that you have at your disposal still work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great. So, I guess I would end on this. Are there three books that you would recommend to this audience for, of digital event planners?
3 books. Well, I mentioned Creativity Inc. That's an amazing book, because again, if you can learn from someone like Pixar, um, that's amazing. The other one, which I actually have here, um, I actually have two others. So it is Steal the Show by Michael Port. Michael Port is an amazing presenter, and he brings the power of improvisation into his work, to help you essentially in any sort of communication media, whether it's digital, in person, whether you're doing a keynote or a one-on-one conversation. Like, how can you be memorable and unstoppable? And then this one is by Karen Hogue, and it's Be the Best Bad Presenter Ever. And this is, again, it's all about sort of flipping talks and stuff on their head and using the skills of improvisation to help people just be more of themselves. Because at the end of the day, that's what people want. They don't want a clone of someone else. That person's already there. They're going to be attracted to you and how you deliver the material. And if you can get better at doing that, you're going to make more of an impact.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Gary, thank you so much. Guys, if you need a keynote on improv and playing, go to this guy. I mean, he's even got a baby Yoda behind him. Like, come on. Uh, that is amazing. I thank you for, and in front of him. Oh my goodness. Thank you for watching this to the end, all of you who did. The books will be in the description below, obviously. Please follow us on LinkedIn, jfloyd.co, and we will see you in the next one.